they already had super camps, and we'll come on to that in a second. And then I've acquired Ardmore, which is an international language school business. And then underneath this, we've just started. We made one acquisition last year where we took over Hertfordshire Council's outdoor learning facility in Cuffley in Hertfordshire. And we redeveloped that. Typical sort of under-invested asset over a number of years from councils. We just totally refurbished the place. And so we got Bushcraft in there and more traditional multi-activity school residentials. And we're just in the process now of acquiring 2 more centres in Wales, one in South Wales, one in North Wales. So that's going to be a new brand called Active Learning Centres.
From Coordinate Sports, it's The Drive Phase, a show about sports founders, leaders and experts and the stories behind their business journeys. Our guest this episode is Nigel Miller, Group CEO of the Active Learning Group. Nigel has spent most of his career in finance and accounting, often taking failing businesses and turning them into successful ones. Travelling Asia and Africa with KPMG and Coca-Cola towards the beginning of his career gave him a key insight into finance and development. During this episode, we cover Nigel's journey from the corporate world to becoming a turnaround specialist and the formation of ALG. Now CEO for the Active Learning Group, he presides over an organisation that creates opportunities across 4 key verticals. Enjoy the show. Okay, so I'm delighted to welcome Nigel Miller, CEO of Active Learning Group, to the show today. ALG operates across 4 areas, including holiday courses, language training, bushcraft, and outdoor centres, and they working with over 50,000 young people and 150 schools per year. Welcome to the show, Nigel.
Hi, good morning.
Great to see you. We're just talking off the recording there, getting into it. So it's nearly did a show before we even started. But how we generally start, just to get people to get to know you a little bit better and start your journey. We always go all the way back. So would you be able to, I guess, if you're going to describe your childhood, how would you start with that?
Well, very happy, but quite a basic childhood. I was born in Rochdale, went to local comprehensive schools in Rochdale, and loved my sport while I was at school. And just basically, it was quite strange because at the time, I was aspirational, trying to work hard, trying to get on, and it is difficult because in some of those schools, people do want to drag you back a little bit, and it's not the fashionable thing to do and not the trendy thing to do with kids to work hard, but just good schools. I had good teachers and good schools, but a very sort of normal, basic upbringing, really.
So I guess like family life, we're going to talk working as a CEO, entrepreneurship now, but back then, I mean, was that something that was like a big influence on you? Did you come from like entrepreneurs, parents? Were they into business, running businesses?
Totally not, actually, but in the sort of distant family, there's 2 things really. One, my granddad was actually a baker, and 2 things if you do a baker: one, you work like bloody hard,
long hours,
he's up at long hours, and he's up early on there. But he went from like one shop and he had 5 shops across the town, and then went up and down, had good times and bad times. And I think, my mum, who was a teacher on there, basically says that she thinks I get a lot of that from him. Actually, my uncle, I'm actually, after school, I became a chartered accountant, and that was from my uncle, who was a finance director in businesses. And when you're coming up, you look at role models. He always used to turn up at our house, and he always had a big car. It was always a really nice car. And I went, what is he doing? He's an accountant. And it's like, right, okay, I need to do that. I need that big car. And he was always just going on nice holidays and cars and stuff. And it is influential at that time, in terms of getting role models. And you're at that age where you're trying to find out what you want to do. So that did drive me. And funny enough, it's just a strange thing because my uncle now, he's actually an FD in one of my businesses on there. So it's really quite strange that I've gone from seeing him as a kid, working for him before I went to university, and now he works for me. So he's gone from being sort of role model and mentor to supporter as we've gone through on there. So quite strange stuff. But no, my mum's a teacher. Dad was in sales, and actually it's made me, even though I am, an accountant, I used to go on the holidays with my dad. He was a travelling salesman, and we'd go off down to North Wales or up into Lancashire and Cumbria. And I'd just sit in the car, and he'd go off and he'd be selling. He was in builders merchants and building materials. And I just saw how my dad interacted with people. and the kind of like the banter and the relationship he built up over years. He'd been going to these places 20 years on there, and some places he couldn't be like that, and other places he could. And it's definitely influenced my style and the way I am with people. And I like to think I've got a decent ability to talk to people at all levels in a business. That's definitely come out of my dad. My mum, on the other hand, she's a teacher, and at the end of my first year of chartered accountancy training with KPMG, and when I said, Mum, this is just not for me, I just don't want to do it, it's really, really boring, I want to be a teacher. And she went, absolutely not, no way whatsoever you're being a teacher. She was at the end of her career, and she went, look, all I've ever been is a teacher and wanting to be a teacher, but she was just not. She said, she didn't like the way the profession was going at that time. Anyway, I went off and did 2 weeks back in my old school, my teachers, loving it. I was coaching a football team. I was doing like the maths lesson. It was brilliant. And they actually let me get on, take do the PE lesson. And I came and said, yeah, fantastic. I really want to do this. And she was like, no, you're going back to KPMG on Monday. And I did. And I'm so pleased that I did, because even though I am a kind of bit of a frustrated teacher and I enjoy that side of like teaching and coaching and mentoring within an organization, the grounding that I got from doing, I don't consider myself a great accountant by any means, but the breadth of experience I got from going into companies and the knowledge I learned and the training I received was just like absolutely phenomenal.
Funny that as well, because it's probably, I know we're going to get into the journey, but it's almost that feeling of wanting to be a teacher, that underlying thing kind of. And if you look at the businesses you're involved in now, although you've come from the accountancy side, you're kind of back into, I guess, delivering, working with kids, a lot of that. So it's a bit of teaching underlying it, yes.
Yeah, massively. And in my spare time, I'm a football coach. I run football teams, and I've done all my kind of coaching badges and stuff on there. Yeah. So that's what I do in my sort of relaxing downtime.
What was the entry into coaching? Have you always done that from, like you said, from being a student, or was that more kind of classic entry point, might be with the kids and stuff when they start wanting to play?
No, it was that. It was literally from playing football myself and stopping playing at kind of about 38. Then my daughter, who's now 18, probably about 8 or 9 at the time, out of nowhere said, Dad, I want to play football. And I've got 2 girls. And at the time, girls and ladies football wasn't as strong a decade ago. And it was like, I thought, well, that's me finished. I'm not been doing football. So the boots and the gloves were in the bin. And I'm kind of, next year, I'm stood on the side of a pitch watching them coaching, and just said to the coach, do you want a hand? I'll just put the cones out for you and just help you, give you, because she was literally on her own, this lady. And then she's bish, bosh, bash, you're running the team, you're in there, and, now I'm like vice chairman of the club and stuff.
Did you come in and take over then, or you could hold yourself back?
A little bit. No, not
pushed her sideways.
Well, no, I didn't push her sideways. She kind of like pushed me front and centre. But I love it. It's absolutely amazing. And I think that gets me that fix on there. But I really like seeing the development, especially on the girls and ladies side. It's been phenomenal the last 10 years. Some of these girls that I coach now as ladies team. Yeah. We started coaching at 8 and 9, and I follow them through their life and their journey, and it's so rewarding to see.
That's a massive success story in terms of women's football, and even like now in terms of marketing as well, doing a great job in terms of raising profile.
It's huge, and it's what is so good. There used to be, and we still get this. You turn up at football grounds and you got a lovely pitch in front of you. So where we playing? Yeah, you're on pitch 99 over there with the ladies, because you're not allowed anywhere near the pitch. And I thought, and at our club we do exactly, we're equal to the men's. So like on the main pitch, treated the same, everything. So it's an equal experience, as it clearly should be on there, but it isn't at some places, and it hasn't been for a long time. So it's a real, I suppose, a bit like in business, I've gone through a lot of periods of change, and I'm quite a changed person anyway. I've lived through that in sport as well with the girls, because it's just, unrecognisable from what it was 10 years ago.
If we circle back to that KPMG, you've finished your training, then you go into business auditing. Is that what you kind of started, auditing, accountancy? How did it work? And I know you spent a long time there.
I did. I spent a lot of time ticking invoices and running around and doing boring stuff on there. But you just got to sit in meetings and meet people and talk to people that you just wouldn't have access to, and get a great core education. But I did that.
That client base must be huge as well. I mean, like the type of companies you're having access to, you see, and kind of what KPMG is going to be auditing.
Massive. So we've gone from big to small, but the Co-op Insurance in Manchester, I spent 7 years going there for so many months a year. ICI, Co-op Bank, insurance companies, just all over. But the big thing, what I got there was towards, I think it was the 4th, 5th year that I was there. in the summer, we got a chance to go on secondments to other departments, and they asked me what I wanted to do. And I said, I'd like to go to the marketing department. And everybody else went off to like insolvency or tax or somewhere else. I went, let's go to the marketing department. And while I was in there, I ended up doing some work for the senior partner. And I did. He enjoyed the work. He made a comment about the work. He said, "Oh, come and see me, at the end of the day." So I went to see him, and I'd literally just qualified at that stage, and he was telling me, what do you want to do? I said, well, I'd like to travel, and I'd like an overseas secondment. So we're looking at all the secondments, and you go to Australia or Bermuda and so on. And I said, well, what is the most extreme weird one that you've got? He said, well, Africa, West Africa, the Gambia. The resident manager went, that's perfect. Oh, well, that's well done, because not many boys from Rochdale end up being the resident manager for KPMG in West Africa. So I literally went, that's the one I'm on, and I'm off. And about literally a month later, I'm sat in Banjul in the middle with me and one partner and 25 staff running audits across West Africa, in Guinea, Senegal, Mali. And it's just the most amazing experience. And that totally changed my outlook. I started traveling a lot. I think I tallied up at the end. By the time I finished with KPMG, I'd been to like 56 countries with them. And I did work in Australia. I've been all across Europe. I've been all over Africa running courses. Running audits and working for clients. And it built a resilience. I mean, running a professional services firm in Africa requires resilience to reach the standards that you need to be at. Basic things that we take for granted. You don't get your power turned off at 3:00 in the afternoon and you still have to get that report out, or the air conditioning breaks and you just can't work because it's just too hot. And, it's interesting things, but it really broadened my perspective on there. And I kind of had a bit of a fork in the road at the end of that, because I got two opportunities. I could have gone back to be the partner in Africa, but a colleague that I'd worked with had gone to work for Coca-Cola and said they wanted a similar person to him. And I decided to go and do that, and then spent the next 2 years extensively traveling Africa, Middle East, working for Coca-Cola as a finance manager with there. So the travel piece, which has actually been a big thing with what I've done later on with expeditions, has been a big part of life, really.
And what the difference is, and in terms of working for someone like Coca-Cola, the biggest companies in the world, what do you gain from that? Obviously, there's a travel, but is it kind of viewing the operational efficiencies, like you're saying there, in terms of the challenges you're overcoming in working in like West Africa, like power going off, you're going to be really efficient to make sure there's no time to waste? Or what would you say the best learnings were you took from that? Coke
is an amazing business. But you look at something like, say, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, those businesses, they get an awful lot of bad press for certain aspects of their business model. But the ability to deliver at scale, at the standards that they operate, homogeneously across the got, is nothing short of remarkable. And I got to see how that basically worked, because audit is, people say audit and it's quite a dull, boring subject, but actually it is the business model, and you're in there in a business checking. So my job there was actually, when the internal audit came in from Atlanta and ripped these businesses apart and said, you're doing this wrong, you did this wrong, I worked for the CFO and went in before them to prepare and went in afterwards to tidy it all up and sort out the mess. So I love that. I kind of like mending things. I kind of like taking stuff that isn't working as well as it should do and improving it. But so Coke showed me two things. One, like the amazing standards that they've got. But secondly, it is a huge marketing organization. The biggest jobs in that company are marketeers, and some of the people they had there were just like phenomenal brains in that area. And it's funny because in Africa, it literally, like normal business, you're dealing with lots of different competitors, but certainly within the Middle East, which is where I worked, it was Coke v Pepsi, and it was literally kind of like, it's all like Man U played Liverpool every week and thinking like, right, how are we going to go and beat them? And or the left back's a bit weak, we'll go after him. It literally is like this. So they've brought this new product, we need to change this, and some real brains in there, especially around the marketing side. But just that operating at scale in especially in Africa, Middle East, difficult markets.
So that was, I guess, through the 90s in terms of KPMG and stuff. Coming into 2000, you're looking at, and I'm really interested to kind of get the backstory, Dynamic Commercial Finance, right? Was that your company at the time? You launched that and scaled it?
Well, no, it's quite a funny one, really. So I worked for KPMG, Coca-Cola, and within both of them, we got an opportunity because Coke, we were in Windsor and they wanted us all to move out to the Middle East. And I just settled in London. I'd lived out of suitcases and bags and moved so much. I went, I've got some roots here, I'm staying. So I didn't. So I actually took redundancy and I came out and gave me an opportunity to then stand back and have a look. And I went back more into the traditional finance. I went into corporate finance. So I worked for a mid-tier accountancy firm called Horwath Clark Whitehill at the time. They've since changed and merged as accountancy firms do. And I was the manager. I turned up at an interview and I think, again, my CV intrigued the partners. They went, this guy's just different than what we've seen elsewhere. Next news, I was like the senior manager of the corporate finance team. So we're raising money for people. And the first set of clients that came through the door were 3 guys who'd been in invoice discounts and factory, turned up. They were coming out of a bigger business, wanting to start up on their own, and no finance director, obviously pretty financially numerate themselves. So I took them through. We raised, at the time, we raised £25 million when Bank of Scotland were very good at lending money to people, businesses. Bank of Scotland were excellent.
Before 2007 or whatever it was.
God bless the Bank of Scotland. And we put them on the AIM market and they had no finance director. And literally, I was trying to recruit my finance director at the time and saying, what about this guy? What about this guy? What about this guy? No. And it was the typical kind of city culture. We're in the pub on a Friday night with these guys. And I said, look, the worst case scenario, I'll be your finance director. I'll talk to the partners. I'll come in. I'll do 6 months with you and we'll just get this over the line. And they were like, next day, phone on, be serious on that. Let's do that. Let's do it. And I ended up spending 6 months at this corporate finance firm. And next news, 28, I'm the FD of a little listed business, new start. So there's nothing. We didn't have an office or anything. And then spent the next 4 years building everything.
In terms of the AIM market, AIM listing, so you said, so that was essentially like a startup and it went straight onto
it. It was so strange
because I'm thinking about my knowledge of in terms of I'll be looking at that I need to have a successful, profitable business with heritage. How does that work then? Is that just a case of what it was as a proposition for the market, or how do you get on as a startup? Basically, I guess I'm asking.
You don't probably. Right, okay. You don't know. So the world's changed, but the time, if you went back 20 years on there, it's a long time ago now. It was, you had the full stock exchange, and to go on there, you had to meet certain criteria and obviously have a bigger track record. The whole reason for the AIM market at the time was to open access to capital to, smaller businesses and newer start. But there was also other junior markets underneath AIM as well. You probably wouldn't get on AIM these days as a new start. It was pretty rare then that we were a new start business. What you had it was new start, but these guys had a very strong track record, an awful lot of contacts.
So they're almost bringing a client base with them as close to guaranteed success as you could hope for. Is that kind of?
Yeah. So it's plug and play really on the business. So that's how you got in there.
Sorry, I just picked my interest in.
No. It's a really good question. It was quite strange at the time. It probably just wouldn't happen these days. But I think, the whole funding market, as it's tightened, this was obviously pre-crash, and then the market tightened down and credit's harder. And then we've had crowdfunding and other platforms come in that have probably taken up some of the slack at that junior end of the public markets on there. So it was strange, but it was a great experience, as I was a young guy and I was going off and sitting talking to analysts and having to work at a high level within there. It was my first job actually sitting in as the FD on there as a business. So it was fantastic. It was I put some serious hours in there because I was actually learning my craft at the same time as actually running that business and moving through. What I loved was the 3 guys were very sales, and they were out there. That industry in the summer involves a lot of golf days and stuff. So they were out of the office, they were gone, and it was right, you sort everything out, back office. So all the IT and the HR and the finance and all the non-sexy stuff. They the sales at the front, but it was just amazing experience on there. It's quite interesting. I don't think I've worn a tie since then for business, apart from when I go to the bank, because I wrecked so many ties hanging off the back of servers, plugging wires in. I went, right, that's it, no more ties on there. So that was good. No, I did 4 years, and I actually I hate the word really, I got headhunted from a far bigger company in that sector who were looking to do a buyout and wanted an FD. And I spent 8 months doing the buyout, and that one was bigger. That was 150 million, and just all the numbers were bigger and bigger. But that was going to be private equity funded, and the deal fell apart at completion. Just people getting greedy around equity. And I just saw that it taught me a lot about people actually, and it taught me a lot about making sure when you're doing deals and you're raising money or trying to grow a business, just the importance of making sure that team is totally on the same page.
It's the right fit,
culture. Yeah. It's the right fit. The MD was a very he's a good guy actually, and very visionary on there. But it's some of the other offices and some of the other regional directors in that business were not on message, and I could see that coming in, and it just opened up. during that period of time. So, it didn't happen. It fell apart. I was moving from London to Manchester, so it felt like I was going back home at the time. Sold my house. So I immediately stopped that, moved back down south, took the house off the market, and then started looking for another job. And it's at that point that I got into this sector.
So before we get into that, and I'm going to get into that with World Challenge, etc. I'm really curious in terms of 28 years old, you're FD of a listed company, etc. and all that. Did you ever have any kind of times where it was a bit of, I guess, imposter syndrome, for a better word? Like you said, you're learning your trade as you're going along. Did you ever have that? Or has it always been like super confident and felt like you were on top of everything?
No, I think externally you're super confident. You've got to have a bit of a game face. I think I'd said before, I think one thing in terms of, right at the back at the start of this, I came from quite a very, very normal beginning on this, and the ability to sort of form relationships and talk to people and be on a level with people has helped me a lot. So going into that, I was very much the fourth man. So the board was like the three who came across, but as we were moving through and changing, I built really good relationships with each of them individually on there. So in terms of, did I always know what I was doing? Did I always go and find what I need to do? Yes. Did I build the black book of people very quickly? Yes, on there. And it's just, my view is get on, put your head in. And I threw a lot of hours at that job, but I wouldn't do it any other way. There's lots of times when I'd wake up and sort of think, my God, I don't know what I'm doing here. And then work away at that. I didn't know what I was doing there. And that's how you build the knowledge and the experience and move forward. I got loads of things wrong. I got more things right than I got wrong. So I moved forward.
Yeah, I guess you don't know what you don't know. You've got to ask and build your network. I
think that's it. As a lot of people you find, like, the 5 or 6 MDs that I've got working for me now, I always say to them, it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to mess up. I mean, the main thing is let's not do the same thing twice. That's a bit dumb if we do it twice, and especially if we do it 3 times, which we do sometimes. But I just think you've got to be humble. You've got to actually be able to hold your hand up and go, I'm not good in this area, or you're not good at everything. And there's this insecurity that people think you have to be good at everything, and you just can't be. So it's a case of building knowledge, building a team, but being humble, I suppose, to just go, hold your hand up and go, sorry, I don't understand that. I don't know what I'm doing. And just, and having the confidence that you don't feel you look silly. So anyway.
So this is probably where we start into the we were talking about before in terms of the turnaround, maybe becoming a turnaround specialist, I suppose we'd say. I don't know if you classify it like that, but moving into kind of the next phase in the market and the industry we're talking about now in terms of World Challenge at the time. I think was that the first entrance into the market, you said?
But it was, they did what all accountants do when you're looking for jobs. Is you buy the Financial Times on the Thursday, and sitting there, I remember I was back up north actually, and I'd gone into WH Smith's, got the paper, and this was when you actually read papers and stuff, you didn't do Google searches on this, and opened the paper, and literally, I'd tell you at the time, I'd done an AIM listing, I'd done private equity, and I'd done a new start on there. And I was looking through thinking, right, I really want a mess now. I want to turn around something. I want to actually go into something and turn something around that
something you can exists. Was that more like I want to get my teeth into something kind of thing, a new challenge? Yeah, and a new sector and everything else. And I went down, honestly, it's very easy as an accountant. There's very well trodden, you go to this recruitment agency and they send you out to lots of jobs, but nothing in there kind of like floated my boat. And open the page, smack bang on the front of the jobs was World Challenge Expeditions, FD, COO designate. So there was a pathway to move up away from being just the FD, which I knew. I knew I didn't want to be like the FD pretty much from then or going forward. For my career, I wanted to be like, the MD or the CEO. Everybody's a CEO these days. It's like, I still call myself managing director really, but it's all about titles. So Americanized a bit, isn't it?
Yeah, interesting. But so I looked at that, and funny enough, actually, at the bottom of it, the company that I'd just been working for, it's a little bit of fate. So the deal that fell away in Manchester, the firm that were advising on that had a recruitment arm, and it was their recruitment arm who was doing this job. So I rang the guy up and said, can you pass my CV from this desk to that desk, please? And I met the owner. So World Challenge at the time had set up, they'd been going for 15 years at the time, and it was a new niche sector 15 years before.
So World Challenge, in terms of I guess for listeners to understand, and probably a lot of people have heard of World Challenge, but this is expedition, is it like gap years and stuff like that for students, or what's the premise? Yeah,
so they started off with literally a basic expedition product, so 4 weeks. So you go into a school and we go, okay, we're going to go on an expedition to Borneo. And they then spend 18 months training and preparing. So they go off on training weekends, off into, in Derbyshire, camping out, using the transiers, putting the tents up, preparing.
So it's a proper exposition then, not talking about a holiday.
Oh, yeah. Well, when Charlie Rigby, who set this business up, who was the founder, literally it was a leader. The school group got a leader, a packet of cash and a map and stuff, and you were off. This was when it started. These are the days before a lot of risk assessments and health and safety, and it was a proper expedition for the schools.
It's a proper rite of passage, though, isn't it, for a young person doing that?
It's massive.
Yeah,
but I mean, I sat on a train once and I heard somebody talking, and they said, "Oh yeah, we're doing our World Challenge," and they were doing an expedition, but with another company. So it became like synonymous with like Hoover at one point, because it was the original start-up business that did this. And Charlie Rigby had come out of the British Army and been into expeditions in the army and set this up. Very, very, very charismatic figure. He's a good friend of mine now. And when I first met him, I remember he literally gave me the job after 10 minutes because he got lost going to the venue. And I said, right, okay, where are you now? Fine. Turn left, turn right, down the street, go in there. There'll be a drink waiting for you. Fine. And he got there and he went, right, okay, you've got the job. So, and he was like, I said, why? He says, we'll just work together. He says, just the way you just organise me. Because he says, nobody organises me. He says, because he was quite a domineering figure. So I'm like, oh, okay, fine, great. Well done.
That's a strange one as well in terms of directions. And they're giving him directions if he's doing an expedition.
No, totally. And this is where it was the formation of our relationship. And so he went into this business, and I remember he gave me a forecast and said, oh yeah, we're going to make this, and then literally as I came in, it was the year end, and I remember ringing him on a Saturday. I was in on a Saturday finishing everything off, and I said, those numbers you gave me are just like totally wrong. They're just not right, and we're not going to make that money at all. I remember him like shouting down at the phone at me going, you put my business back, it's ridiculous, what are you doing, those numbers? And I literally said to him, and he's not used to it, he wasn't used to being stood up to, and I said, okay, listen, not a problem. I'll finish these off for you and I'll just leave. I'll just go off and do something else because you need me to sort this out, but you got to like give me some space. He went and put the phone down. 10 minutes later, picked the phone. He goes, you're the best thing we've got for this business. Get on and solve it, and put the phone down. And it was like, right, slot. And that was literally the starting point, like firing the starting gun on this, because he was such a mess. It was such a good product. It was such a good product. And what we did for the customers was amazing. But everything behind that was a shambles.
So when you said the numbers were wrong, was it just top line figures just way off, or was it like costing? Or was it just everything?
I think what you find is, and this is the problem you get with my guys now, because they work for an accountant. So when they come and give me numbers, they're kind of like, that are not right. I'm going, well, it's clearly not right. And so I can pull it apart quite quickly. But people tell people what they want to be told at times, and they're not. If you've got a domineering boss and they're not tough enough, you're going to sort of massage the figures a little bit and make them look better.
I get
you. Just not being realistic on that. Plus, also, secondly, not having the right control procedures in place to make sure that putting junk in, you're going to get junk out the other side. So I think it's quite of a deadly combination. If you've got really weak processes and systems in place around the finances, and you've got quite a domineering board or leadership, when you put them two together, you end up getting numbers that tell people what they want to hear, but are not the reality of the actual situation on there. So we just went about improving the whole back office again, the boring side of the business. And everyone was going off on expedition, and the people would be doing the sales side. But it's but even on the sales side, I mean, just that was like we'd literally go off and sell to anybody, and there was no process on there. So we went through a whole market profiling and putting a proper system and pipelines in place, and all the basics really, all the basics. So that was an amazing business, but it had really, he'd also hit a point as a leader where he was pretty much exhausted, and he'd lost his kind of love for that business. So we took that through for 3 years, refinanced the business, and then ultimately, again, this is where you just have like sliding door moments. I went to a conference at Barclays in Canary Wharf and met a guy that I'd spoke to about a year before about potentially buying a business and acquiring and putting it on top of World Challenge. And I saw him on the tube. We hadn't spoken for a while. I saw him on the tube coming away from this conference. I said, how are you doing? He said, what happened to that business? He said, we sold it. And I'm like, oh, you should have told me. Why do you not get back into, I didn't think you were interested, blah, 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 blah. And he said, do you want to talk to Tui? TUI are very interested in acquiring businesses within the education sector. I went, okay, interesting. And we were at a point where we needed to actually properly refinance to continue our growth, diversify a bit, and add some other business, or sell, to be honest, to actually realise the money for the founder. And long story short, I made contact with them. It was when I went to the board, no, not interested. 9 months later, we were sold. And
in terms of the turnaround, so when you've gone in, I know it was a mess structurally, but was it profitable at that time or not?
No. So, I mean,
it's a full turnaround then from loss making to profitable and exit.
So the whole thing on this, the end to end, so it was 3 years. So when I came in, he said it was going to make, I think it was 750 grand. And when I finished the numbers, we'd lost 250 on there. So we were losing 250 and it had lost 250 year before. So it was in a real problem. And he had a $1.5 million overdraft with a personal guarantee against his house on there, the whole lot. So over that 3 years, we improved the performance to the point we sold to $1 million profit and got his guarantee back in the meantime. So he wasn't like, his house wasn't up. And we did a little MBO in between, which is where I became an owner, because that was the other thing with this. The other thing with owners when you go in, it's like they always go, "Yeah, well, come in, have a bit of the business to incentivize you." And as an accountant, it's always like, "Well, yeah, but you've got to go and sort it out and make it happen. Do all the schemes and stuff to put it in place." So I did, and then they're all. As soon as you do that, it's like, "Oh, did we say it was that much?" Yes, we did say it was that much. It totally was that much, yeah. and it was that much. Remember when he was losing 250? So let's just remember that. Anyway, so good to his word, we did that, and then eventually we sold. So we sold at $1 million profit, and I then at that point, so I'd become the FD. I was then the COO, so I was running the business day to day for me. So he wasn't involved in the business, and there was a sales director and an ops director, and me, and then a team underneath. And we had at the time, I think we had about 140 working for us, and we're in the UK working with 600 schools on there. So it's quite a sizable business. And then we sold to TUI, and I sort of worked out a new plan that I wanted to do. At the same time, we were doing gap years, we were doing UK-based work, but we actually wasn't very good at some of those other areas, but we were very good at the expeditions. So we did the sale. I became the MD of the business. We were owned by TUI. Were great, especially for the first year, 18 months as owners.
Was that like I know you stayed on, was that like I call it an earn out or whatever? Did you have to stay on, or was it one of them? Yeah. No, well, so I've done, somebody once told me, especially because I've been through corporate finance, I went, don't do earn outs, don't get tied in. You need to sort of, anyway, so from not doing an earn out, I got tied into a 5-year earn out, which is probably the longest earn out I've ever heard, ever. And I had to get the numbers from $1 million to $5 million to get the next piece on there. I mean, the nice story at the end of it, I got it to $5 million on there in the next few years, and it all worked out. Sounds like it sounds like a burnout, not an earnout, that one, 5 years. But it was at the end. It was really good at the start, and then I hated it at the end. But I'll come on to that just in a second. But so we went through this, sold, and I changed the strategy, and I went, right, look, we're going to be really good at expedition. Stop this, but we're going to go global. So we had Australia, set up in the Middle East, with an office in Boston, which they had at the time that I joined, but it was very small. And we started sending to American schools. We grew the business. At the end, Australia was the same size as the UK on there. So it was a good strategy for that period. I mean, if you look in the middle of COVID, being very, very focused on a business that involves a lot of travel overseas, it looks like a really bad strategy. But actually, for the rest of the time, it worked. It worked fine. So yeah, so I did that, and then it's like all big companies when they buy you. It's a bit different here on this, and I'll explain how I structured it at Active Learning Group differently when we did this deal. But they start meddling, or they start going, actually, we think you should do it like this. And go, right, really, based on what? And show me, well, we just think it's similar to this business and that, well, it's not similar to that business. And actually, it's quite a very, very specific business. So we mentioned earlier, talking, you've got to be very open-minded. And I was extremely flexible and open-minded. But at the end, it just became, I work hard and I like working hard, but it just became a real slog. And every day you kind of feel like you're fighting. So we'd done the earn out, and they got to the end and said, look, at the end of the day, this is your business now. You can run it as you want. So I did, after 6 months handover, and just thought I need to go and find a new challenge and move on. And I wanted to not stay in that one business and just grow. I wanted to go and do other things. So I came out with the intention of investing, but actively investing within smaller businesses. So I'll take an equity stake, but I'd be involved in the management
teams, not on a full-time basis, but like assisting and coaching and doing, certainly on the finance side and in a number of businesses. And I did. I came out, I made an investment not in a business that sells to schools, but a different sector. But I bumped into the guys who set up the Bushcraft company. And it was a young gentleman and a young lady who were, I think Alex and Alice were probably 24 or 25 at the time. Yeah, they're not old now. So they're still, 24, 25 at the time. And they'd had a fantastic idea. Alex had worked for Ray Mears. He goes nowhere near Bushcraft and Woods these days. He's more like a nice pair of jeans and a crisp white shirt. But he basically could see the opportunity of taking what they were doing with Ray for adults into the schools market, and literally started off out at the back of his VW Polo with Alice, running little courses for predominantly private schools, predominantly prep schools, around year 6, year 7, and just managed to attract some investors quite quickly. Thought it was an amazing idea, but it then got real visions of, because these guys were quite well-known finance guys, had got real ideas of grandeur early and had put none of the kind of foundations or basis in place. So we could sell, we could deliver we could sell courses, but actually everything else behind it in terms of, the back office again wasn't there. And I remember I was going in there just to do a day a week with them, and they were running out of money and he had no money, and he was saying, and I thought, this is a good business. So I sent him some money to pay the wages. On there, I said, you need some money to pay the wages, and this is a good business. We're going to sort this out. And we did. And I bought all the shareholders out, and then we ended up being the three of us in there. We set off. We set up.
In terms of the shareholders that are coming, like you said, the finance guys, was that like the classic kind of wanting a return quickly and pushing for growth rather than, like they put it in and they want the fast, rapid growth to kind of get the return out?
I mean, the good thing on this is there's no names on this, so we can talk more openly, because I think it's important, especially the kind of listenership that you have with the smaller businesses where maybe they're going out trying to attract finance. I think if I was a real small business, having somebody who just gives you the finance is great for a few minutes as you get the money. But actually, you probably want a little bit more. You want to bring some skill set with that as well to help you, because as you grow, you're going to want a sounding board, but you're also going to want a broader skill set within that business, and you can pick it up on the back of the funding. What I found when I went into this business, the non-exec director board fees were one of the biggest lines on the P&L. Yeah. So they were putting money in, but then taking money out and then doing round one. And it was all very complicated, trying to apply big companies. So we'll do round one funding, round two funding at this price multiple. And I'm thinking, guys, this is like a really, really small, it's not even doing $1 million turnover. It's a very small business and it just needs proper nurturing. So we cleared that up because it was, one, they were good people, and two, it was a really, really novel new product in a sector which is quite traditional. Yeah. So the kind of school residential market with the likes of like PGL and Kingswood and Bickel is quite traditional, and it's been quite traditional for a long time. This business has come in and like snuck in under the radar and bitten off quite a nice little, slightly bitten off quite a nice little market share quite quickly. So we bought the shareholders out and then went to work on this business and grew. And then we got from $1 million to $4 million by the time we'd sold, and we'd moved office a few times. I remember the things that I could offer coming in, saying, look, you'd walk onto a camp and it's all well and good, the campfires are going, and they were trying to cook breakfast for like 40 kids on an open campfire, and God, it's raining, this isn't going to happen. So we're just trying to put the structure in, we were cooking on gas, and suddenly, I remember we got our first warehouse because we had so much equipment, and it was just things that they just didn't even think of, real basic stuff on there. So we built the business up, and actually I'd always gone, well, I'm not going to sell. So we've done World Challenge on there, and I just wasn't interested. I wanted to be in there and build something and drive it forward. And we actually got it was 2016, we got an inquiry from Cognita, who are the global schools group, who are one of their strategic pillars is character development in young people. And they saw Bushcraft as being a real driver for that model. I remember we went to see them and I was like, I'm not interested. We're fine. We literally just paid off all their debt. We got ourselves set up and we were moving forward nicely. Not interested. And I just don't want to go and work in another corporate and have to go through that sort of sale, earn out, fallout, leave. which you don't intentionally go in with it. Actually, I don't fall out with them on the way, but I just fall out with myself and get bored and go, right, I need to go.
Falling out of love with the process.
Falling out of love with it rather than falling out, yeah. And we said no, and they kept coming back and kept coming back and kept coming back. And at Christmas 2016, eventually we said, the two of them were younger and went, look, this is a good deal for us. And I went, okay, fine. Now at this stage, I'd bought Outlook Expeditions or bought into that business. That was another turnaround. It's like World Challenge competitor that had fallen on some hard times. And I was working in that predominantly. I was going up to Wales every week and running that business and doing a day a week in Bushcraft. And we turned up at the meeting with Cognita, and my partner made it clear that I don't want a job. I'm not interested in going into a corporate. And I'm saying, well, I do a day a week. And they ran me up the day after and said, don't give us this one day a week. You don't come in, do this. And I said, well, I will do, but I want to set up this for you, which is Active Learning Group, which is building a portfolio of brands, deliver character development, well-being and skills across a range of brands and across a range of formats, be it to schools, be it to individuals in the school holidays, be it to international students coming in. Yeah, that was fine. And to be fair, they've been absolutely brilliant. I mean, the sale process, they were like good as gold on that process. It's quite weird because the advisors that were sat on that side of the table are now sat on this side of the table with me as I'm going buying other businesses for them. So it's been quite a nice journey, but they've been fantastic. They support us really well. But what they do and what the CEO, so Chris Jansen, who's our CEO at Cognita, he promised me on day one, he says, listen, you're very entrepreneurial, Nigel, and I'm going to leave you and create an entrepreneurial environment for you. And if it doesn't work like that, you need to come and tell me. And I report into, I sit on the European board within Cognita, and I get to see the workings of the schools and how that we got 40 odd schools in Europe and UK. And I get to see that and input into this, but we're very much left alone. And they're smart in terms of that structure, because it works. It works for me because even though I don't own it, it's my baby.
Yeah, and you don't have that. So you're not having that kind of, what you like, corporate overreach, like leaning over your shoulder kind of thing like you were before with the TUI deal.
No, not a lot. I mean, you get a bit, but that's, they own the business. So they're entitled to do that.
They know what's going on.
They know what's going on. So, nothing more that I wouldn't want to do, but it's not overbearing and they don't stifle for that creativity. So it's the best of both worlds. And trust me, having been through a pandemic, sometimes it's quite nice not owning it for a year to then come back.
So this is like 2018, 2017, 18 kind of time.
2018. So Cognita had super camps.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask. So you've got Outlook, Bushcraft, and then they've already got super camps. So you can jigsaw that together and say this is what the group's going to become.
So what I've done. So Outlook is outside of this. I mean, so my thing is I sort of own and chair that business now independently. But there's got Active Learning Group, which is the Cognita-owned piece, has got the Bushcraft company. They already had super camps, and we'll come on to that in a second. And then I've acquired Ardmore, which is an international language school business. And then underneath this, we've just started. We made one acquisition last year where we took over Hertfordshire Council's outdoor learning facility in Cuffley in Hertfordshire. And we redeveloped that. Typical sort of under-invested asset over a number of years from councils. We just totally refurbished the place. And so we got Bushcraft in there and more traditional multi-activity school residentials. And we're just in the process now of acquiring 2 more centres in Wales, one in South Wales, one in North Wales. So that's going to be a new brand called Active Learning Centres. So
perfect. Apologies trying to put in the Outlook group. Outlook into the
No.
Maybe that's a deal to be done in the future. Maybe
it is possibly once we start travelling again. Yeah.
So you've come in, and did you have eyes on super camps? Did you have a understanding of that business prior? Or?
So not really.
And in terms of that brand, that's going to be one that resonates with our listeners. They're going to know that brand. Supercamp probably compete with them in certain areas of the country. And so a lot of our listeners will be operating holiday courses of various sizes and levels. Yeah.
So Supercamps was one of the sort of early large-scale businesses in this sector. And Cognita bought that business back in, I think it was about 2010. Because at the time, and it's where things come around in full circle, is the previous management of Cognita had looked to do a kind of buy and build of a range of businesses like Supercamps, like Bushcraft back then, but never really got off the starting block. So they ended up with Supercamps. And it was kind of a little bit unloved and a little bit left in a corner because it was so non-core in relation to the rest of, the schools and the operations that they had. And the guys set super camps up at the time. I think it's probably if you look back on it, it's probably a really good lesson of, if you buy a company, how not to structure a deal in terms of tying people in, because basically they sold the business in, and then next news, all the schools and all the clients moved across to another new business that was set up, which is now one of our competitors. And, it's a difficult thing. When you've got entrepreneurial owners, you've got to tie them in. You have to tie them in if you're doing a deal, because it's just all the value leaves the business if they then leave and go and set up again and take that with them. And you think it was quite an obvious thing to do, but be amazed on how many times that happens in deals.
Yeah, and I guess tying them in the right way as well, I suppose, with the right incentives or the right, I guess with those type of owners or entrepreneurial owners, like everyone, would be, I guess, freedom and empowerment to be able to do it, like you said, be able to do what you want to do or run the business.
Yeah. No, very much so. Very much so. I mean, you got to tie them in. These people are not, and I feel I've got my foot in two camps, really. I'm an accountant who's very entrepreneurial. I'm not a pure entrepreneur on there. So in terms of, you can't just lock entrepreneurs in and restrict them because
for them. Yeah, they're not going to be.
No, if they're not enjoying themselves. And it's a case of like making sure you keep playing to the sweet spot and don't have them starting doing PowerPoints and monthly presentations and all this kind of stuff, because they don't do it and they're not going to be interested in doing that. So you've got to create it's on the owners. It didn't happen this anyway. A lot of promises didn't happen, and as a result left and the new business set up. So I kind of picked it up when the strategy had gone from that about 40 odd schools that they operated at in the holidays, predominantly in the summer and Easter, to they'd lost then some of the bigger schools that they operated at. So they then chased the volume, and this is where the problem started on that. So suddenly, I arrived and we've got 75 schools, and I went up to 84. So we were chasing, our operation was massive, but they were quite small. So they were like, the number of kids on the camp per day was relatively small.
More margins or just breaking even?
Small margins, yeah. So it was a real volume model in terms of the number of venues we're operating. So the recruitment side of it was at full stretch.
Yeah.
But the logistics was like, it's huge. And we're sat here in the warehouse, behind me. It's a big old warehouse. And I observed that business for the first year, and it was just too difficult to run. And I've seen other businesses in the sector, especially where money comes in and private equity money, and go, oh yeah, well, we're going to go on a growth strategy and go from here to here. And they've been making decent money, and they think, because the spreadsheet says, oh, you just do from this and you double the venues, you more than double the profit. And I'm just sitting like chuckling and nodding my head going, it just does not work like that.
I guess that's probably a metric that's difficult. And I don't know if many people use it, but that gearing up or launching a new venue, probably, I don't know, it'd be good to get your take on it in terms of that being a mature camp that's predictable capacity, predictable fill rates, probably 2-3 years to get it to where it needs to be. And if you say trying to get
3 years,
3 years, yeah, so you are tracking it. I thought you would be.
But I track it on. So in terms of our tracking and reporting, I look at all camps less than 3 years, because when I go in there, I'm invested for 3 years. So I mean, we just invested a lot in terms of marketing. So billboards and backer buses and bus shelters, and we even just done our first TV ad on one of the businesses which worked really well actually. But it was quite brave to go and do that. We were having a little bit of a punt in lockdown, thinking let's try some stuff and see what works and what doesn't. But it's very much an investment plan in terms of building that customer base, making sure the retention's there.
I think that's probably one for our listeners to learn as well, because 3 years for a long-term investment. Obviously, it's easier when you've got cash behind you or whatever to be able to cover it. But that 3 year investment, most small businesses probably couldn't afford it. But also, if it didn't work year one, maybe they get a year two, but then that venue's getting cut, right? You have to cut your losses, I suppose, before it's really fulfilled.
No, correct. And I think if you are going through that growth phase, I do think you've got to take a slightly longer term view, and you are going to need to invest. Clearly, if you're in a venue and you move into another venue, you've got a client base you can try and take with you. But the one thing that people forget when they start doing growth is repeat rate and retention. And I go back to Bushcraft. I remember sitting there in our office, and I got the staff in with the whiteboard, and I drew a 5-year set of numbers out, and I said, this is what happens if our repeat rate goes below 75%. And it's like, they're going, we're doing 1 million in new sales. I said, you have to do 1 million in new sales just to stand still. So you're not going to grow. If that repeat rate drops down and show them, and it's such an important metric. You can be chasing new customers and forget to look after the ones that you've got. And it sounds obvious, and I'm not teaching people to suck eggs at all. It's so easy to lose sight on that. So not taking a longer view and not focusing on that customer base, because you need to, build a customer base, retain it all, build some new is where you want to be, isn't it? Retain it all, build some new, End of year 3, happy days. Right, now you can possibly scale some of that marketing back, look after that customer base, knowing obviously you're going to have some natural churn with the age profile. So your product might only work for, certainly with Super Camps, ours works really well from sort of 5 to 9, and we're definitely weaker between 9 and 14. Up to, everyone says, they do whatever 7 to 14, and it's pretty hard to be relevant.
Just the general interest will start dropping off in the teenagers, isn't it? As well as how'd you get them?
9. Yeah. So we're looking at new products in that area and doing that. So, and that's the plan. So we're now, where did I take it? We've come back down. We are 46 venues. We're probably, the operation is scaled, but we are probably double the profit that it was doing before.
Nice. And that's all UK. Is it all UK based? Predominantly, is it predominantly southeast or?
Predominantly southeast. We got the odd outlier, but our plans are to scale regionally within the UK. But Cognitive just moved into the Middle East and have just bought a small group of schools and have done a joint venture partnership with RGS Guildford. So they just built like a new school out there, and they're going to acquire more. So we are looking to supply and be the provider of holiday camps out there as well. So that is our plan.
So in terms of, I know, looking at the group, the next move or the most recent move has been into the centres, active learning centres. What's the kind of the future, I guess, the vision for the next 5 to 10 years? I mean, you've got kind of split out a little bit there with the super camp side, but is it just to scale, or is it to go into different verticals? So
at the minute, kind of model we've built is I've got like a central platform. So the central platform has got a centralised finance team, centralised warehouse, procurement, logistics. All the buying is all done centrally in one big warehouse across all the businesses, central HR, central IT, da-da-da-da. So all the stuff that is, I say, the kind of like non-sexy stuff. I remember when we were bought by TUI, every single company that had been bought in there still had their own accounting system. They're all in different CRMs. We have Salesforce across every brand. The websites are all the same platform. The e-com's all the same. So it just means that we can scale and build. So I can bring businesses in to sit on our platform and plug them in very easily. But I'm building ALG in the way of going, each of the businesses that sits on the platform. So Ben, who runs Super Camps, runs his team as the MD, and I leave them to run and be little entrepreneurs within their own area with our support. So we're not in that. So it's not me running each of those businesses with teams in there. I've got leadership teams in each one, because I think having that ownership at the brand level is so important to make sure that we give the customer the best service we can do. And people need to feel pain and joy in terms of, for executing their strategy. They've got to feel the joy of it working and feel the pain of when things don't work.
And that was great. You've put me. So I had a question around almost like, how do you structure it as obviously CEO of the group? I'm interested in like the day in the life, how do you structure your day? How are you communicating with all the different teams? And they are independent. I'm assuming you're going to have some oversight or even input on strategy. So when Ben's creating the strategy for Super Camps, that's a group, that's a decision you're making together. What was it look like on a regular basis?
Ben rings me probably about. I've got 4. I've got 4 MDs, and they're all different. They're all very different individuals. So Ben probably rings me about 5 times a day, and we chat and we discuss stuff. And he's probably the more corporate of the 4. Right. On there, and I'm distant. I'm very hands-on as well with them on there. But without trying to meddle, I can kind of maybe spot things a bit earlier or see things and just help them. The other area, we acquired Ardmore, and the management team there have been in that business for 18 to 20 years. So I'm not going to walk in there, mate. So I'm not going to walk in there in language schools. I sat on the board at the TUI education division, listening about language schools for about 4 years. So I've never run a language school, but I feel I know that sector because I've listened to so many board presentations. But one thing I know is they know it a million times better than me. Yeah. But what we have done there, so for instance, they had an example. We can provide oversight and direction, capital, and a platform which means we're as efficient as possible and we can have better systems. So they didn't have brilliant IT and reporting in there. So we've put Salesforce and Power BI and all different types of IT and reporting systems. We consolidated the finance team underneath, but the sales, customer service operations is all totally driven by them. Yes, we closed their little warehouse down and all their stuff's in this warehouse because it's more efficient. But it's just, it doesn't affect the customer and it doesn't affect the ability to deliver the product to them. But in terms of, we look at their business and go, the accommodation block I thought was a little bit tired. So we put the capital into it and we've renovated it. And you see the scores on accommodation this year have gone up. So no, we don't know about the finer intricacies of language schools, but I do know what a building that needs investment and, general things can look like. And we can enable them to deliver what they may not have been able to deliver in the owner managed business arena because of the capital we've got. But I don't want to smother their ability to make decisions and run their business and feel like owners. Yeah,
exactly. So, I mean, from that relationship for the MDs you've got seems like perfect. Like you're not having to worry that obviously not have to worry about cash. You've got to focus on the cash flow, but it's not we're going to run out of cash, or and also you've got that fresh eyes approach where you've been around the market. It don't feel like, I don't know, you have like classic investors trying to throw money at you to say spend this for the growth, but you've got that pragmatic view, which
I think the guy's got the hardest job is probably Max, who runs the Bushcraft company, because obviously, I know every nut and bolt in that place. So I'm probably the harshest on him and probably he has the toughest time. But it's just got such good opportunity that business could grow exponentially. The hardest thing is recruiting the staff of the right level.
Got it.
So we kind of have a guiding. We've got a few things that sort of weld us together. I'll answer your question in a minute on what a day looks like for me as well. Sorry, but it's like
no, I was just thinking about the phone calls. Is it just incest? You must have some structure.
Well, it is. No, it is. I was funny enough. My 14-year-old daughter she's on holiday. She wanted some work to do to earn some money, so she's packing some boxes in the warehouse today. And the guys were asking her, they're all going, "Oh, what's your dad like? What's your dad?" They're all talking to her, and she's, "Oh yeah, he's always on the phone." And I went, I'm always on the phone, but I'm quite old-fashioned in that sense. Well, I've noticed in corporates, they don't answer the phone anymore. It's all done on email and stuff.
Slack or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, can we just have a phone? Can we just talk? I love Teams. It's the same thing as, and then this, but it's just, it's good to talk.
Yeah, definitely.
It's good to talk on that. So I think, so we've got that structure. We've got like the central teams, the head of finance director reports to me, head of logistics reports to me, HR, yada yada, all those guys and girls, and then the four MDs. But we try to keep it entrepreneurial. What do I do? We have quite regular dinners where we'll go out and sit down as a group. What I like is, even though they're running 4 different businesses, there is a lot of synergy between how you work, lots of things you can learn. There's some great cross company product development going on at the minute, and so we do that every Monday. I have a catch-up call with them all. I've got all my reports on Power BI, so before we're waiting for spreadsheets to arrive, trading, I literally, it's on my phone, it's on the system. I can go and find out what's happening, and then I'll ring them up if what's happening with this number, why are we doing this. And then I like to try. The last year has been unusual, hasn't it? But generally, my car, I'm doing a lot of miles every year, and my car's kind of like burn out after a couple of years. And this year is different because the mileometer said 4 at the start, before the start of the year, and it still says 4 now because it's just not moved really. But I like to get out and about and see products. And our sex is funny because we're not operating every single day all year. It's very intense between May and the end of October. Super camps, obviously, in the school holidays as we go through. It's been difficult this year because you've not been able to get onto sites because of COVID and testing and bubbles and all this stuff. So, very much like to sort of get out and walk around and see stuff. And then literally Friday is get back to mission control, talk to them all again, tidy up, plan, work forward. Just try and stay in contact with them, be available, be open with them. And I've got that downwards, but, I do report into a corporate, so that there's quite a bit of, it's quite a bit of reporting upwards as well. So,
yeah. And what's your, I'm assuming in terms of like administration or being an accountant stuff, you're probably detail oriented for sure. Do you have like executive assistant? Do you have a team of assistants that are helping you out? Is it just all you? Are you managing your own emails, calendars, all that type of stuff?
No, it's all me. I've had probably 3 secretaries through my entire career, and they've all been good in some ways, and in other ways it's sometimes a bit harder, more challenging, because you are kind of sometimes there's quite a bit of rhythm and structure, and quite a lot of time there isn't. And I know when you get really busy, probably in your life, you kind of being hit by things from lots of different angles, and you crave a little bit of like structure and rhythm and cycle. And I just don't think you ever get there. So to perhaps disappoint you on that. I
suppose it's different to like corporate life or as an accountant or lawyer or whatever. It's like that's kind of a structured thing. Paralegal, whatever it is, they know exactly how it works, kind of thing. Whereas, like you said, these things come in loads of moving parts with what you're doing.
There's a lot of moving parts. I mean, if you look at, say, like active learning centres, has been again quite opportunistic, because we've managed to pick up assets, given the market conditions at the minute. So, it's obviously always difficult, because your opportunity is somebody else's downside, but it's just a fact, and those things are not like planned. You've got an idea of, we might look at this area, but then the opportunity comes along, and you just got to switch on and make it happen.
Yeah.
On there, so you do. I think a lot of people fret about planning going forward, and I'm naturally, like I said, a detail orientated person, and you need to do that. But I think as the owner, or the leader, and the kind of the driving forces from the businesses, you've got to keep yourself pretty flexible, and know that things are not going to be nice and smooth, either. They're going to be up and down and all over the show. So yeah.
And do you think, and I'm sure you have, in terms of your approach to leading or business philosophies, and I know you have, because you've got it kind of standardized in terms of when you're acquiring businesses. But what would you say your kind of pillars are in terms of that, in terms of leading and business?
So I think in terms of my personal style, I'm accessible and I'm visible. And actually, the hardest thing for me has been, over the last year, 18 months, I'm pretty much sat behind a big screen talking to people over the screen, and so you're visible in a different way. And I was listening to the radio on the way in this morning, and people saying about, the water cooler moments that you just miss by not being in an office. And we know there's an awful lot of gossip and junk goes on around chit-chat in an office, but you do just pick up and learn, see and understand things from being together physically. So for me, very much, I will get back to, and I'm still trying to be I'm very accessible, but I want to, I like to be very visible, so people can, and approachable, so people can talk to you and find out. Sometimes that annoys my MDs, because you are you'll pop up somewhere and they go, "Oh, so-and-so's just said this to me," and they go, "Oh, bloody hell, they don't know what they're talking about, is this?" But they do, ultimately, and I know, because I've had it where I've had bosses who are asking you stuff, and it can irk you at times, but you've just got to, I think, take some of that on the chin. So being open and accessible. I think the other thing which we have, which I try and keep as simple as possible, is we have kind of 3 pillars of what each business is trying to do, which is provide an exceptional customer experience in a safe, inspiring and sustainable environment delivered by remarkable people. And it's quite generic on there, but actually I use that. I use it every day when I'm talking to people as an overlay on everything. And you're out at a camp, and I go, is that a remarkable person? not a good person or this. Are they going the extra mile? Are they, totally customer focused? And or we're looking at the environment. You turn up at a venue, and I'll say, is it genuinely that? Are we in an inspiring environment here? Or the easy thing is to forget sustainability. Something like the Bushcraft company can be, if he's not careful, relatively dirty because it's got a lot of vans moving around and a lot of generators. And you're thinking, hold on, guys, we've got to be careful here. So we use that as an overlay on all our businesses coming through, and our strategic direction and our strategic pillars for each of the businesses, because they all have their own individual little strategic plan. We'll start with that and go, well, what are we doing to make sure that our people are, extraordinary?
Yeah. I know you said, we spoke about your day. A bit of advice that we always ask as well. I'm conscious on your time, be respectful of that. But
okay,
if you could give, I guess if you could go back to when you started your career and give yourself some advice, what would you tell yourself back when you first started? Maybe when you first started finishing with KPMG, or first going into that, for leaving school, leaving university. What would it be?
It's a real difficult one, this, because I used to be. I was chair of governors at a school and a multi-academy trust for 10 years, and I used to do the Scholars Club, as they call it. I used to do like a little talk to the kids on that, and we turn up, and then the teacher would go, "Oh, have you got your PowerPoint slides?" And I go, "No, there's no PowerPoint slide. I'm going to sit on that table, and we're going to have a chat for an hour and go through." And we talk through. Similar to this, we'll walk through the career and talk. And people go, "How do you do this? And how do you do this?" I said, to be honest, beyond after accountancy and probably going to Coca-Cola, I didn't plan after that. I didn't plan. And I've been open-minded. And that has worked really well for me. And I've just said, life on this is sometimes like there are opportunities coming past you all the time. And you need to be, I think, open. And some of them you'll take, some of them you won't. And if you don't take them, well, you miss the opportunity and that's fine. It's gone. You can't be looking back. You've got to be moving forward, because there will be the next one coming through, hopefully, on there. So I think some of it is being, I've always gone, get in somewhere, work hard, give everything to that project, be focused on there. And good things tend to happen, I think, to people who have that output. And I've been very fortunate that the people have taken me on journeys and taken me in or done things, or latterly now I'm the person sort of, building the new projects and driving forward and bringing people back in. So I think I would say, keeping an open mind, being flexible and not being too rigid in the plan. I think the one other thing that I would say is, which I've tried to learn latterly is, and I'm not the best at this, but is delegation. He's trying to, I definitely try and take too much on to do things myself. And then sometimes, we'll undershoot in terms of performance. And I know, and then I'll beat myself up on that as well. So having that ability to delegate, building that team. I've spent, certainly in the latter years, I've been spending more time on the team and building them than in terms of building myself. And in the early part of your career, you're spending all the time on building yourself and delivering yourself. I don't think, to be honest, it sounds like I wouldn't change. I wouldn't change anything. But what I would say is potentially even more emphasis on training and personal development. I'm a big advocate of it, and I still don't spend anywhere near enough time myself doing it now. Lockdown's a classic one, isn't it? You start, I'll do this, do that. And then actually for business leaders in lockdown, and this will resonate, I think, with your listeners, it's been such a tough time for us because we're trying to keep everything going together and you're worrying about everybody else and the business and, and the sort of like starting gun for the future has been being moved further and further back on us all the time. And you're trying to understand the environment and suck out, I've never listened to the news or watched the news as much as I've done in the last 18 months because you're trying to find any kind of indicator of what the new norm might look like. And sometimes you forget on that. And I'm going on holiday next week. And I'm just like definitely ready for a break on that, because it's been a tough 18 months, and not because you're running around, like you said before, not driving around, not physically moving and stuff. It's just the mental concentration of what we've had to be through. So certainly,
everyone's looking to you as well, right? To look into the CEO, and it's like, well, most of us haven't been through a pandemic before, so it's kind of looking to you for answers. So yeah,
there's no real book, is there? There is no real book. It's again like, and again, I think as leaders, it's like switching on, being on, and unfortunately, you're on for a long period of time. And it, just is what it is. I think the other thing is when you first start your career, certainly coming through, KPMG was a huge like work and hours culture at the time I was going through. Yeah. Well, I know the world changes. Some of the chairmen I've worked for have been like, pretty, tough guys and hard taskmasters on that. And I think the whole thing around well-being is a key thing, but it's trying to keep that balance as well. I mean, we can't all be kind of like, you've got to put the hours in, you've got to put the work in, but it's just having some of that balance. And I think that's really key. So I think making sure as a leader that you're keeping investing in yourself and looking after yourself and understanding. We talked in the preamble before we started today around flexibility on time. Yeah. That I think for leaders, I think that's been the single greatest thing that's will emerge out of lockdown, is the fact that the working day is more flexible, and the ability to work even more flexibly is just the norm now. When you started doing that, I felt a bit guilty because you're so used to work, start as early as you can, finish as late as you can. But now it's just there's more flexibility, isn't there? So that's a good thing.
Love that, Nigel. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you giving it up. I know you're really busy, and anything we've mentioned, things like that, we'll add in the show notes. But just want to say thanks for it, and that we appreciate all the insights that you've given us today. It's been a great episode.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can write to us at dryphase.podcast@coordinate.cloud, tweet us at coordinatesport, or follow us on Instagram at coordinate_sports, or on my account at James_ventures. This episode was produced by Nancy Kwamboka, with support from Claire Goodchild and Lola Small, with special thanks to Rochelle. I'm James Moore, and you've been listening to The Drive Phase from Coordinate Sport.